Welcome to the Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
Hello.
Hey.
Guten Tag.
Aloha.
Hola.
Shalom.
Hallo.
Namaste.
Ni hao.
Privet.
Hello.
Salut.
Yassas.
Salve.
Ciao.
Bonjour.
Our podcast talks about the latest trends in the worlds of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Crypto and Blockchain Talk. And today with me, I'm very excited to announce, we have Shi Khai Wei, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Longhash Ventures. And he's going to tell us all about that. But let me tell you what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about yield farming, DeFi, and a bunch of other stuff that's related to it. But first of all, Shi Khai, welcome to our show.
Hi, Aviva. It's a great pleasure to be here.
I think for the audience, before we go into the whole movement of everything that is yield farming or DeFi related and all these big words and phrases that people are going to need to understand, I want them to know why they should listen to someone like you.
Yes, of course.
So,
very important.
It is important. So why don't you tell us about yourself and also who Longhash Ventures are?
Sure thing. So myself, I actually got into the blockchain space a few years ago. Well, I was actually trained as a biologist, believe it or not, quite a few years back at Imperial College. I took the scientific rigor and I decided I wanted to do something a bit more practical. So I went into the business space, specifically in management and strategy consulting. So I was with McKinsey for a couple of years, primarily advising the multinationals and major companies, and mainly financial institutions on the digital transformation of their operations and their strategies. So that's where I got exposed first to the idea of blockchain and Bitcoin naturally and how it could disrupt these institutions on the horizon. And I found that actually most of these institutions and even leading consulting firms like McKinsey are actually not well equipped to embrace this revolution and understand the true potential of this technology and this movement. So that's why about 2+ years ago, when my CEO and founding partner, Emma, asked me to join Longhash, I very quickly agreed to jump headfirst into this industry. Now, what is Longhash? And now we call it Longhash Ventures. So if for those of you who immediately went to Google Longhash, you might find that longhash.com refers to a data journalism or data media platform that actually is supposed to, like you said, cut through the BS and get to the facts and the real insights of the crypto. So that is actually by one of the other co-founders, Emily Parker. So it's a great site as well. Recommend checking that out. But our arm is called Longhash Ventures, and we specifically rebranded to make that really clear. So at Longhash Ventures, we are an accelerator and investor in early stage blockchain startups. We have accelerated about 25 startups so far, and we have the next cohort of 10 currently going through the accelerator program. And we are supported by the Singapore government. We're invested by some of the leading investors in Asia, Hashkey Capital and Fambushi Capital. And we bring you the program by partnering specific technology partners. So we partnered with Parity to support Polkadot. We partnered with Zilliqa, currently working with Algorand, and our upcoming cohort actually working with Filecoin. So we'd like to work with these strategic protocol players that we think are going to be major players in this Web 3.0 community that we're building.
Excellent. How many of your businesses are in the DeFi space?
Actually, you'd be surprised because in the Algorand cohort currently, the major theme is Finance 3.0, which is essentially open finance, which is essentially kind of related to DeFi. Because DeFi is a special moment in the turning point of blockchain's history of adoption. Because I would say it's the first time we've really found like a product market fit for a group of features or products aside from like speculative store of value. So actually most, if not all, of the projects currently in the cohort, all 10, are related somehow or another to DeFi or like to some form of finance. But if you're talking about like pure DeFi, like everything's on chain, I would say 3 or 4 of those.
I think what I want to do now is just step right into the controversy.
All right.
Jump headfirst into this pool. As you may be aware. And of course, I'm going to be quoting a bunch of people as well as we're going to have a really robust talk around this. But the renowned crypto trader, Coinbase, he has come out and said that he believes that DeFi is a Ponzi scheme and even bigger idiocy than the ICO ever was. And many other people have backed this up, saying, including Vitalik Buterin, he's comparing DeFi tokenomics to the Fed's money printer. And Vitalik has actually taken aim at coins, which first are built upon his own protocol, who are just designed to incentivize yield farming, and he's comparing their underlying economics to irresponsible monetary policies. When you talk about yield farming, phrases which are now coming, because of course there's digital finance 3.0, we're talking now about DeFi as opposed to CeFi, which is centralized finance, which is what's currently going on in the world, which is when you have the bank and it's a centralized system, where a decentralized platform do the same kinds of transactions and investments, but of course on a decentralized platform. How would you describe yield farming?
Actually, I would say yield farming as a term really evolved after people discovered, liquidity mining. But I would say there's a subtle difference that in mindset that makes it all so different. So I would say, before I can explain yield farming, let's go to liquidity mining, right? Like,
Sure.
What does it actually mean? So mining, as you know, refers to, like how the other blockchains mine blocks, right? Be it in proof of work or in proof of stake, they commit certain computational power, they commit certain capital, and therefore they mine new blocks and therefore earn new tokens generated by those protocols. Well, for some of these applications, they are not kind of generating new blocks because they built on Ethereum, especially on the DeFi ecosystem especially. So what they do instead is that they incentivize you to perform certain actions. One of the earliest cases that took off, Compound, which is a lending protocol. It's kind of like pools of funds. You can put in your capital in a certain pool and you can borrow off a different pool. Easiest way to think about it is a lending protocol. So in order to incentivize people to then use this protocol more, to then lend out, put more money into the pools, borrow more from pools to generate activity, right? They decided to incentivize it by giving out their own token, their native token called COMP, COMP, and that counted as what they call liquidity mining because you are providing liquidity or you're borrowing from that. And people started using it like crazy because they wanted to earn these COMP tokens because they have value, even though it is not kind of backed by real revenue back then. It was more of like a speculative value. It's supposed to have some sort of governance value. But in order to accrue those tokens, people started doing these actions which are desirable to the protocol Compound. And then a group of people realized that, actually, this is like quite a profitable enterprise. And so they wanted to maximize the return that they're going to get from liquidity mining. And that's where, they start doing these circular trades. They start optimizing for like, how do you purposely deploy your funds in such a way that you can maximize your yield. And that's where I think the term yield farming came along. And since then, of course, many other protocols have adopted this kind of like incentive mechanisms for people to provide liquidity, buy their tokens, put the tokens into the liquidity pools along with their native tokens, and rewarding that behavior by issuing their own native tokens. So I would say, yield farming specifically refers to the mindset of farming or like maximizing, optimizing the return you get from your current existing assets. And that in itself, it's already kind of has a negative connotation because when you start to put your yield first, the returns first, you're forgetting what was the original purpose of having these mechanisms. And part of this be the failing of the protocols and the mechanisms themselves if they didn't think far ahead to say that, actually, I want to incentivize this behavior, but taking to an nth degree, we need to safeguard it against, the toxic speculation behavior and so on. But partly it's the user's fault as well for not thinking like, I want to contribute and use this protocol and I get rewarded for it. It becomes more of like another way to exploit these like token issuance mechanisms.
But it still comes down to the fact that because people aren't thinking about what the original reasoning behind it is and focusing on the yield, that it is really turning into something where I don't want to say that there's a lot more ability to scam, but there are a lot of issues around the entire DeFi space, which is allowing for people to take advantage of other people. And on top of it, even Vitalik, he tweeted out, I'm reading one of his tweets, where he basically says he's steering clear of yield farming completely until it settles down into something more sustainable. Now, the fact that somebody, the guy who invented the protocol where DeFi is living, is saying this, it's pretty substantial, isn't it? I mean, it's, for me, it's kind of pulling the rug out from underneath everyone, but it is a historic statement in a way. It's being made by the guy whose protocol is the engine behind all of these DeFi products. But the way that you're supposed to be using DeFi is, as many people have compared it to Legos, where you build your own products together so that you have a complete service line, so you have your best fit for purpose in terms of what you personally need to get out of your own money and investments and transactions or whatever it may be. But it does seem like there is a lot of pump and dump going on in this space. Would you agree?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I would add that I actually agree with Vitalik. You know, for most people who, if you don't spend the time to understand what you're really putting your money into when you do yield farming, you're better off just staying away from it. Because anytime when people are driven by greed and are blinded by the returns that they can get and are not doing the proper research, it is really dangerous. And that force of greed has exactly manifested into this, I would even say kind of like toxic and negative culture of scamming people, of like doing the rug pulls, of just doing a pump and dump. Well, if liquidity mining and yield farming were conducted by, well, you could say well-intentioned protocols, a serious protocol, intent to generate to real use cases for their products, like that's fine and dandy, and perhaps it is a mistake on their mechanism design part, maybe their token issuance. One example would be, for example, Curve, right? Sure, it's a legit product and they do have a proper value proposition, which is like the low slippage transactions trade exchange between stablecoins, but they didn't think through their tokenomics well enough, such that they distributed way too much to the people who just provided liquidity. And what ended up happening is most people just earn it and they sell it off. And so I think that would be the equivalent of what Vitalik would say, poor monetary policy. And I think since then, they have done many things to try to alleviate the situation, including giving bonuses for people who lock up the tokens, the liquidity for a longer period of time, promising to lock up the CRV for a longer period of time, giving those new tokens some governance power as well. But it could be too little, too late. Like that is more like a tragic case. Whereas there are projects which have taken advantage of this mania of yield farming and went ahead and just just forked some automated market maker protocol where you can just add liquidity for kind of, think of it more like a foreign exchange of cryptocurrencies, and you're putting in capital for this like currency exchange platform, right? And then I'm gonna give you this this much of my native token, and if you buy my native token and provide liquidity for that, I'm gonna give you even more returns, up to like thousands of percents of like return. And that, of course, if you don't look into the value of that, and you just put your money in, definitely the native token itself is subject to some sort of pump and dump. The protocol itself, if you don't look into the smart contracts, they could have certain admin keys, they could have certain rug pulls or backdoors left open, such that the team can either print a huge amount of tokens themselves or just like take control of the assets that you put on the platform. And so exactly, like you need to do your research. When you put money into these things, you need to do research and do yield farming. Who is the team? If it's anonymous, then you need to look at the code. Are there certain vulnerabilities? Has it been audited? Right? What is in the roadmap for them to maybe decentralize and provide governance for the community? What is the actual proposition of the protocol that is being created in the industry, rather than just like another copycat that seems to be riding on the hype train? And until you are comfortable with all these things, I told Vitalik, stay away from yield farming. But I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bath water, right? By saying that, well, all yield farming or like all liquidity mining is evil. It's equivalent of saying, well, because some ICOs were scams, therefore all token projects are scams, right? Like definitely the difference there.
Well, absolutely. And I love the list that you gave when you're saying for people to do their due diligence and to look into what their investment is. So you do realize that the majority of people don't have a clue how to look into code, how to even research. I can tell you right now, just from our own surveys and focus groups, when people see that there are obvious red flags, because they see other people still investing in it or doing it, literally like copy trading, because they see other people doing it, they think, oh, hell, I'll just ignore these red flags and throw my money in with everyone else's down the pan. So, you gave a great list on how to actually validate a DeFi project. Let me ask you this really simple question. DeFi is supposed to stand for decentralized finance.
Yep.
And of course, some of these projects are centralized. So how does that fit into the scope of DeFi when it's CeFi?
Yes, that is a great question. So what would constitute CeFi and what would constitute DeFi, right? I think the current accepted industry explanation would that CeFi would be run on centralized platforms where the ledger itself, and to keep track of which assets belong to who and what interactions are facilitated, are run by a central party. So that would be centralized exchanges. Whereas the accepted definition for DeFi is as long as you are running a smart contract and people interact with the smart contract in order to move the assets around or like pull it together with other people, then it's counted as DeFi. But as I pointed out, there are nuances to decentralized finance because not everything is decentralized, right? Like Vitalik likes to point out that, there is the logical decentralization or centralization. There is the political decentralization or centralization. And there is also the physical decentralization. Now, blockchains actually are physically decentralized or like technically decentralized because they run by a group of computers instead of one server, but you're logically centralized because you're all looking at the shared version of truth. And you're supposed to be politically decentralized so that not one party can control the platform. Well, in his case, he's also trying to decentralize the power from himself and Ethereum Foundation. Now, it's the same criteria need to be applied to these decentralized finance projects as well. Well, by virtue of building on Ethereum, it's already physically decentralized because the smart contracts are immutable and distributed. Copies of that are stored everywhere. The logic, it would be centralized because you're looking at a shared version of truth. But the political part has to be looked at, right? If, for example, they have certain admin to the smart contracts that they can change things as they like. If they have ownership over a significant portion of the tokens that they allocated to themselves, that would be red flags of centralization in this like DeFi universe that you should watch out for, because this means that they can control and influence the platform, be it in terms of like the new features, new tokens being minted, or like being able to sell those tokens and dump on the market on a whim. So just because it's on contracts doesn't mean you can take the whole word decentralization wholesale.
So this is where DAI or DAI comes into play. Now, DAI is a decentralized currency and it's pegged to the US dollar, meaning, of course, that one DAI equals one US dollar. Now, I want people to understand what is DAI that they keep hearing about. And why should they bother? What's the difference between DAI and some other, we talk about comp and everything else. So what is DAI exactly?
Yeah, sure. So the very first thing is, in order to create a financial ecosystem, or in this case, a DeFi ecosystem, one of the very first primitives, or what we call that, or the first building blocks of the Lego blocks that lay the foundation upon which everything else can be built on would be the stable coin. So stable coins are cryptocurrencies that are pegged or supposed to be pegged to the US dollar in terms of value, so 1 to 1. Of course, in reality, they could go off peg for various reasons, but we can go into that later. So DAI came along as the first stable coin in the Ethereum ecosystem with ETH, the native value currency of Ethereum, ETH, as the collateral. Because the collateral was ETH, therefore DAI had to be limited by the ETH market cap, and therefore the DAI in circulation is technically limited by how much ETH there is and how many people who hold ETH are willing to collateralize it for DAI. Now, but that being said, there are now a number of people who are willing to do so. Typically, the early adopters of Ethereum, the major portion of my assets may be in ETH, for example, but I still want to use some of that on a day-to-day basis with a stable value. And that's why I lock it up in these vaults, and I mint these DAI for me to use in, supposedly daily activities, right? Because when it's pegged to USD, I can then say, hey, here's $1 for your coffee. Here's like $100 for your services. They also form the basis upon which you can do all these other things. So you can then lend it out. You can then start to say, hey, I have USD, but I want to earn like interest on top of this. So how do I do that? Maybe I could lend it out. Maybe I can use it to invest in certain assets. I exchange it for certain appreciate in value and therefore earn my interest that way. So having that base is extremely important, which is why currently there was a lot of concern over like DAI off peg, and therefore Maker has been very interested in adding these collaterals to make more generation of DAI possible. And in parallel to that, all these other stable coins have sprung up, including USDT, TUSD, Gemini has their own now, Binance has its own stable coin as well. Everybody is trying to be like the base layer upon which DeFi is being built. So I would say it's a critical component and forms the foundation, and upon which you can do a lot more different things. And it's more practical because it's pegged to like the everyday currencies that we use and recognize.
Binance are going quite heavy. They, of course, have their Binance coin, which is the DAI of Binance. What I mean? What is it that they see that perhaps Tone doesn't or Vitalik doesn't?
We have to think in terms of, if you were Binance, why would you do this and what position would you be in, right? What is the business model of Binance? They are essentially an exchange. So technically, they don't really directly care, so to speak, but whether or not these products and coins, are generating like proper value. I'm not saying that they don't. I'm saying that they are less incentivized to care if they actually have proper value, have real monetary policies that are robust, have proper token distribution mechanisms that make sure that you align long-term incentives with the users. They don't really need to care about that. What they want to prioritize that will them is trading volumes, right? They want people to then do a lot of trades because there's like strong sentiment like, oh, this is going to go up or go down, or I'm going to get a certain amount of yield by like lending it out these tokens to you. They have very interestingly gone into the DeFi space as well by launching their own blockchain, Binance Smart Chain, which they've optimized for compatibility with Ethereum. So any project that you build on Ethereum, technically you can just port it over the Binance Smart Chain very easily and start issuing your tokens there, start getting your users to go there. Now, it could be said that like maybe indeed, they are trying to decentralize themselves. And indeed, that is the story CZ has been telling everyone, that, they need to disrupt themselves before DeFi disrupts them. And that is indeed a great story. So that is one angle. But the other angle is that if it is indeed bringing in more volume onto their chain, and therefore more volume as well into the exchanges when they list some of these tokens, then like that's potentially the end game, right? They just want to be where there is the most volume and where there's the most growth in the industry. Now, whether, the intentions it's just like a short-term copycat, or whether they are serious in terms of like in the long term, like embracing this DeFi movement. But what is clear is that the strategy right now is to basically capture the hype. And we have to monitor carefully to see whether they do move towards being more open and decentralized in like hosting their blockchain and in terms of like the projects that run on there. Right now, it's heavily subsidized by the huge amount of grants and funds they're pumping into the projects. They've set aside something like $100 million to incentivize people to build on Binance Smart Chain. This could be a short-term thing where wherever there are incentives and there's money to be earned, people will flock to that chain regardless of like whether or not it really makes sense in the long term. So let's, like Vitalik advised, wait until the hype dies down. And that's when you really see the products being built. You really see the value propositions that emerge when people need to use the products and look past like the yield that you can just get by either building on there or using the products on there.
And you're right. Binance run always in the direction of wherever the greatest amount of volume is. There's a fire trail in the path. They run down it so quickly.
They list trees so quickly, and then of course they gotten so much flack for that after that.
Oh, absolutely. Binance also introduced DeFi staking of DAI stablecoin, and they basically announced on a tweet their DeFi staking where their users can now stake DAI with up to 12% returns per annum. They have that little thing going on, which of course is offering their customers additional benefits when it comes to staking their DAI.
There are forms of staking because, so if you hold certain things like stablecoin or base native token ETH, and you want to stake them somewhere in order to earn some rewards, that is one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is people might be asking you to do certain actions which will earn you the native tokens, and then instead of selling away those native tokens like from Compound, like we mentioned earlier, you could stake it and therefore lock it out long term. That can give you certain voting rights, give you the rights to earn some of the revenue that's being generated from the fees of the platform as well. So those are kind of like two different forms of staking. So when you mentioned DAI, you're really talking about the first one, which actually goes back to a bit more like yield farming. Mm-hmm. But a lot of other projects actually use staking as a way to align the longer term incentives of the token holders so that they don't just go after the yield. They actually use those native tokens that they earned and stake it in there so they can actually make use of them, right? Use them for what they intended to do, which is as governance tools. So they can vote on certain things on the platform, so they can have a share in the benefits and the value that the platform is generating.
Binance are doing. They're facilitating the staking of DAI on their platform. They're really going with this whole DeFi movement. So it's actually quite interesting because on one hand, you have Vitalik. On the other hand, you have Binance. And let's say that you're not a newbie. Let's not make you a newbie. Let's just pretend, Shi Kai, you are just getting into more serious investments and forays into the crypto sphere. Mm-hmm. Would you listen to the advice of Vitalik Buterin and friends, as we've discussed in the beginning of this program? Or would you be listening more to CZ from Binance and going, hey, invest in everything, going yield farming all the way, stake your DAI coins, go, go, go. What direction, if you weren't you, so I'm really asking you to step out of the box on this one.
There is a saying in the crypto Twitter that's been floating around, do you want to make money or do you want to be right?
Yeah.
The practical reality is people want to make money, right? Even though they might say, okay, sure, there are scams and there are going to be people who are going to do pump and dump and pull the rug under you. People are going to think that, I'm going to go in and get out before they dump it. I'm going to get out before they do the rug pull. Or I'm going to be one of the insiders, even worse, and do that to other people as well. So I would say, there are, obviously, it's a kind of a Wild West and there are gray areas, and you could make money for sure going into these yield products and, just optimizing for your returns. But is that what you really want to do? Is that the risk that you want to take, right? In the longer term, we need to assess, why are we in this space? So that is quite a personal answer. If you're in this to just make the largest amount of profit that you can make, then obviously the logical answer is to chase after the biggest yields and get out before they dump on you, or chase after the most secure yields, optimizing for risk and return, and therefore trade your way to wealth, right? But if you are in this space because you believe in a shared vision of what blockchain and Web 3.0 could represent, what kind of future they could build, which is a more resilient, a more collaborative, transparent future where assets and people are just more interoperable in a way. So I could move my assets, I can collaborate with your project, integrate with it just so easily. If you are trying to move the industry towards that direction, then you would discourage and you would be much more careful and discerning in picking the projects by using their products, by providing liquidity to those protocols which are serious in building components of Web3. So it's a personal choice for you, but for me, I like to stand more on towards the Vitalik side while keeping in mind that, not everybody is going to think like you. So there are definitely going to be huge groups of people who are going to be optimizing for you, don't care to look into the specifics of these protocols. And be prepared that those people might, spoil the market, so to speak, right? They might jump into all these things and get burnt. They might be incentivized by the wrong things. So it is up to you then to make those strategic choices and to also what you want this community to be like. I believe in Web 3.0, where everybody is actually doing your part. When you earn these governance tokens, you need to vote, you need to propose. When you invest in protocols, you need to tell people why you're doing these things. The responsibility of a collective ownership of these open source protocols falls on the users and the owners of the tokens of these protocols. So I will urge everyone, rethink, why are you in this space? Make it a balance between being practical and looking at what is going to be here in the longer term. Because, you can earn all the money you like, but what makes you feel a sense of meaning and purpose and what's going to give you a good social kind of benefit moving forward in the rest of your life, right? So think about that a little bit.
That is really beautifully said. Shi Kai, I want to thank you so much for coming on Crypto and Blockchain Talk. It has been an amazing experience having a chat with you.
It's my pleasure and to talk to people who are trying to build something meaningful in the space. So if you're a startup, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a builder or just a business person or just like to chat about this, reach out to me.
Absolutely. And I will put Shi Kai's contact details into the body. You'll see it on the bottom. Just scroll down. All of the opinions on this show are our own. We are not pushing anything, nor does this constitute financial advice in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. And nothing we are saying here is to be considered an investment recommendation. Please remember to do your due diligence, do your own research. Don't just follow people like you're a sheep in a herd. Make sure that you do your homework and do everything you can to make sure that you are taking the risks that are proportional to what you can actually afford to lose.
That's right, guys.
Absolutely.
If you are looking at the space and you're interested to actually build something, you think wow, this is so interesting. I want to do something in the space, start a protocol, start a project. We'd love to support. And we are actually recruiting for our upcoming cohort where we're giving out $20,000 worth of grants where we're not taking any tokens, not taking any equity. We just want to support builders who are serious about building useful products in the space, in collaboration with Filecoin. So do check it out as well on Longhash Ventures longhashventures.com/Filecoin.
Wow, that's amazing. I would like to thank everyone for tuning into this week's Crypto and Blockchain Talk. We have the entire list on cryptoandblockchaintalk.com, and it goes from iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, all the way to Amazon Music and more. There's, I think, almost 40 that we stream on now. We also play these podcasts on our sister radio station, Crypto24radio.com. That's Crypto24radio.com. Of course, you can reach us on the normal social media channels of Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. But what we really love is to hear from you directly. So please email us at education@savvydigital.com. That's education@savvy, SAVII digital.com. Again, thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate having you as our listener. So take care, be safe, and goodbye.